Shalom, my friends. Welcome to Weekly Parsha with Yehuda. This week's Parsha is Parshat Mishpatim. In English, this sometimes is translated as laws or statutes, and particularly they're distinguished as laws that usually make some sort of sense, as opposed to chukim, which are more just do it because God said so. So this Parsha kind of starts off in a more legalistic tone, basically talking about a lot of these, controversial topics of, Hebrew slavery, that sort of thing. Obviously, when we speak of this, it's speaking more in the context of indentured servitude, not in the, the way that slave is usually connotated today. I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, though. I mean, this is kind of something that, it's colored at the end of the day, this isn't a practice that we do today, right? A lot of people try to use this as like a way to, say like, well, the Bible says all these, here's a conversation that usually happens is when people are, whether they be, Christian or atheist or whatever, when they're trying to criticize, people who actually try to keep the Torah, they'll be like, well, the Torah talks about slavery. Well, keep in mind that we don't do any, like, you just don't see this in the world. And they'll be like, well, the Torah also says don't eat shellfish. It's like, yeah, I don't eat shellfish, I always find that conversation piece funny, is like, yeah, like, this is why you need an oral tradition to understand, like, this isn't something that's practically, or even relevant, honestly, like, this isn't something, it might have even had a contextual, for like the time period that this was happening, but certainly not something that is really applicable to our lives as we live today, right? So fine, this is speaking about a lot of these situations. I mean, we can justify that this was really a cultural situation, not something that really holds extreme relevance today. So we talk about justice with regards to people striking each other. A lot of this gets kind of dry, it's not really, people quarreling and what to do, how to deal with, justice if somebody is, kidnapping somebody, selling him, found in his possession. I guess that could sort of apply to today with regards to like what's going on in the world with kidnappings and whatnot. So, all the horrible things that are happening in, the land of Israel, as far as, the war that's going on against us, the hostages, that sort of thing. So, yeah, a lot of these are just talking about very specific situations, with regards to, this is an interesting one where it says, men should quarrel. Let's say there was men quarreling and they hit a pregnant woman and she miscarries, but there's no fatality. He shall be punished. When the woman's husband makes demands of him, he shall give restitution according to the judges. But if there is a fatality, you shall give a life for a life. So this is where kind of this, famous statement comes from. And of course, as we know, this is why you need an oral tradition to understand these types of things, is that a lot of people take a lot of this stuff hyper literally, and they don't know which parts, if you talk to a Christian, Isaiah 53 is hyper literal, right? But, if you talk to a Christian about, the third holy temple, oh no, it's all spiritual. It's not really a physical thing. The Levitical priesthood isn't really coming back. It's all going to be under Jesus, So it's very pick and choosy with this. This is where, the oral tradition comes into play, and like we can understand, right? What is this really speaking about when it says a life for a life, right? Some say that they must actually give up his life, and some say must pay money, right? But it's not an actual life. So it's very contextual, and I think that a lot of people who don't have an oral tradition and don't have any sort of Masorah will fall into this trap of thinking, like, look at all these immoral ideas in the Torah and whatever. And ultimately, for one thing, you don't really get to decide what's moral and what's immoral, right? That's all relative from an atheistic perspective, in my humble opinion. but also you're probably not interpreting it correctly if you don't have any sort of Masorah. And, never mind the fact that this is in Hebrew, right? So a lot of times stuff gets lost in translation. So very important. A lot of people will fall into pitfalls of interpretation. And that's why we have things like Christianity and Islam, or the joke, why did God create Mormons so that Christians would know how Jews feel? I mean, like that's what it is. Like anybody can make up their own interpretations and go off the derech. So that's why we have this. So this, once again, these are kind of, if a bull gores a man or a woman, right? It's the bull shall be stoned, flesh shall not be eaten. The owner of the bull is clear, right? So if it's, basically talking about responsibility and like the owner was warned and like it was more than one time and they didn't guard the bull, then they're responsible to, I guess a degree where the owner would be accountable and there would be a very severe punishment. By the hands of heaven, it says, not through a court, right? So what does that mean? Put to death. So there's a discussion about that, right? Yeah, so a lot of these, I always find it interesting when people try to speak on these matters who don't really, find any sort of relevance to this in their day-to-day life, whether they be Christian or atheist or whoever. Like, the Jews have been keeping these laws throughout the millennia. We're the only group of people with the paper trail of doing that. And that's, where Rashi's, speaking from, the generations before him, from the Talmud and the Mishnah and, all of our Masorah. You would really not, like, these are sort of complicated ideas, right? They're very situational. And in order to really understand, these monetary and, just justice systems, there really has to be some sort of, legislating system that is beyond just what, you see in the text here. And that's why I think the oral tradition is so important. It might not be important if you just believe that none of this is relevant, in any context and it's all archaic nonsense. But I think that this, for those of us that do see that this has, eternal meaning and don't just sort of say, well, it was replaced by something new. You would imagine there would be some sort of system tracking beyond, what's happening here. So speaking about more of this restitution sort of situation with money and homeowners and donkeys and lambs, and so a lot of these can be applied to today's context with cars or houses or these types of things. That's where this, it's talking about property and stolen property and who owes what, and that's really the main gist of this. Right now you're talking about a man seducing a virgin who's not betrothed and lies with her, and she'll provide a marriage contract. So you have marital situations, you have what to do in those types of situations, infidelity, or you shall not allow a sorceress to live, people who act carnally with an animal, sexual immorality, slaughtering to other gods. You're just getting sort of like a bunch of laws here in Parshat Mishpatim, talking about, stealing, all of that. So you get your fair share of laws here. You should not curse a judge. You should not curse a prince among you. You shall not... Oh, and then this is talking about your firstborn sons you shall give to me. This is talking about to redeem him from the Cohen with 5 sellers, right? The tradition we have of Pidyon Haben, if you're familiar with that. Yeah. A lot of that's what it is a lot of this stuff just sounds so confusing, and part of it is because if you take it hyper literally, without a Masorah, you probably will not really, because a lot of this does fall under the realm of also, the Aseret Dibrot, the Ten Commandments, right? It says you shall not accept a false report, do not place a hand with a wicked person to be a false witness, right? You shall not follow the majority for evil, and you shall not respond concerning a lawsuit to follow many to pervert justice. So this is a very infamous verse that Dr. Michael Brown likes to talk about. It's very difficult to explain. He likes to say that there's an interpretation that says it says follow the majority. I mean, it's very simple to explain, is that it's saying that if it's basically the implicit reasoning that if you're not supposed to follow the majority for evil, then you should follow the majority for good. And if you think that that's, not a good implicit reasoning, right? I don't know what to tell you. How are you supposed to make a decision? You're only supposed to ignore the majority for evil, but if the majority, are doing good, you're just supposed to ignore that. Like, that's where this is coming from. So that's, once again, this is why an oral tradition is needed, because how are you supposed to make a decision if there is a majority doing good, right? The assumption that Dr. Brown, I think, was making in that case is that he was saying that he was ignoring the evil part. He's just like, he says follow the majority. It's not follow the majority, it's follow the majority for good. So you have to understand, you have to have the decisive understanding of what good is. The Sanhedrin, right, is supposed to be ideally composed of good, upstanding people. So the idea is that whatever the majority would be for that would be good. That's how you make the decision. So if you follow Dr. Michael Brown's logic, then the Sanhedrin wouldn't be able to function, because you wouldn't be able to define what good and evil was. And you have to have some way to understand that. Anyway, that's the long and the short of it. But I think this Parsha is a perfect example of why we need the Torah Shebaal Peh, because this Parsha really doesn't make any sense without it. It's just kind of in its own weird category. We're going to get to some more interesting parts of this, though, later in the Parsha. So now we have, you shall not pervert the judgment of your opponent. So this is more, once again, don't accept bribes. Honestly, this is the foundation for a lot of the court system, the justice that we have today. So you can thank the Torah for, upholding this set of, laws that really has permeated into society, the fabric of society as we know it, as far as how we adjudicate. A lot of it really, really comes down to this. And then it gives us commands, not to worship other gods, of course. And it says 3 times you shall slaughter the sacrifices to me during the year. So this talks about the three pilgrimage holidays, which include the festival of Sukkot, right? And you have the festival of, Sukkot. Wait, is Sukkot mentioned here? 3 times. Well, it says 3 times a year, right? So it says the springtime in Egypt before, and the festival of the harvest, right? Oh, it talks about Bikurim, right, which is referring to Shavuot. It doesn't look like Sukkot is directly mentioned here, but it's talking about the 3 times a year that the Jews would go to, or the Israelites, Jews together, would go to Jerusalem and celebrate these holidays, which include Pesach. Here might be the reason why Sukkot isn't mentioned, because it's kind of like Sukkot is lumped in with Yom Teruah, also known as Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim, right? Since people, sometimes want to hear the explicit names, fine. So yeah, Bikurim's, Shavuot, right? The first fruits, as it's understood. So those are the 3 holidays: Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. once again, like I said, Sukkot lumps in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So you shall not sacrifice the blood of the sacrifice with leaven, right? So it's talking about Passover. Fine. So moving on. So this is one of the most favorite parts of the Bible to Christians, because they like to pretend like this is the angel of the Lord, although it doesn't really use that lashon here. Behold, I am sending an angel before you to guard you on your way, and when you bring you to the place that I have prepared, beware of him and obey him. Do not rebel against him, for he will not forgive your transgression, for my name is within him. And you will hearken to his voice and do all that I say, and hate your enemies, and I will hate your enemies and your adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will destroy them. So here's what it is. Like, this is an angel. That's really what it is. Like, why does an angel have to be synonymous with God, right? Just like prophets speak on behalf of God. That's the point. That's the function of an angel, right? The Christians want to look into this and pretend like it's some secret code word for, like, God is synonymous with the Messiah, synonymous with the angel of the Lord. It's just not there. Like, even Jesus never even makes the explicit statement that, every time you see the word, angel of the Lord in the Tanakh, that's really a secret code word for Jesus, right? And like I said, here you don't even see that, right? That's not even the way that it's described. So, and that's, when we talk about Deuteronomy chapter 4, where it says explicitly, you saw no form when God spoke to you at Horeb, right? There's a reason for that. We're not supposed to worship God in any form. So that's why I call it the Great Jesus Angel Hunt. There is literally no foundation in the Tanakh to argue for that. I would argue there really is none in the New Testament either. Maybe a little more so if you want to deify, Jesus or whatever, but they don't have a standard for determining not only the Messiah, but they don't have a standard for determining who the angel of the Lord is, or which passages are regular angels and which passages are just, are pre-incarnate Jesus angels. They have no standard other than they think the Messiah is God, so anytime they can conflate the words to make it look like the angel is God, right? They'll ignore the fact that it's an angel, and they'll just attribute it to being God Jesus or whatever nonsense they say. So what are you going to do? It's silly. But once again, like I said, this Parsha gets even more interesting in the final Aliyah, because, so it's describing more laws, right? It says, there will be no bereaved or barren woman in your land. I will fill the number of your days. I will send my fear before you and confuse the people among you shall come, and I will make your enemies turn their backs on you. So this is interesting. It's talking about I will drive them out from you little by little, and you have increased and you can occupy the land. Oh, occupation. Oh no. Yeah, this is before the Palestinians ever existed. And I will make your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines. Who the Palestinian Canaanite, the Palestinian / Philistine / Canaanites / Ishmaelites / Arabs. I mean, I guess the Palestinians are traveling time identity swappers. Anyway, I had to throw that jab in there. If you watch my videos on debunking the Palestinians who any given day are Canaanites or Ishmaelites or Philistines, whatever they want to be, In this day and age, you can be whatever you want to be if you close your eyes and believe. So, whatever. So, moving on, Exodus 24. One of the most interesting passages that Christians love, right? I did a whole video on this with, where I debunked Sam Shamoon on this, demonstrating that God does not appear to Israel in any form. If you want to watch that video, I'd highly recommend it because it gives this in more depth. The sources for that I use. So here's the part that usually comes up. It says, Moses, Nadav, and Abihu and the 70 elders ascended, and they perceived the God of Israel, and beneath his quote unquote feet was like the forming of the sapphire brick and the likeness of the appearance of the heavens for clarity. And upon the nobles of Israel he did not lay his hand, and they perceived God, and they ate and they drank, right? So this is, once again, the Christian will take this hyper literally, and they claim that this means that God has feet and hands, and this is a Jesus guy and whatever. Chas v'shalom, this is, lahabdil, this is not God manifesting himself in the form of a man. Rather, this is a vision, right? Because it explicitly states, and I make a point in this video to explain it, right? I think on paper, if we isolated this verse out of context with the rest of the Hebrew Bible, you could argue, a relatively strong case for, the Christians' anthropomorphic obsession with angels. And, well, actually, it doesn't really mention an angel here. It just says, they perceived God, or, whatever that means. But if you look at Numbers chapter 12, it explicitly states that when God spoke to Aaron and Miriam, he says, if there are prophets among you, I will make myself known to them in a vision. I will speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful throughout my house. I speak with him mouth to mouth in a vision and not in riddles. And he beholds the image of the Lord. So why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? What's interesting, so this word tamuna, it says utmunat. This is the word for image. This word is conspicuously absent from Numbers 24 with regards to whatever these individuals were seeing, which is why when you really look at Numbers 12, right, when God is speaking to Aaron and Miriam, right, remember Aaron was one of the people who were, Moses and Aaron and Nadav and Abihu, right, when they went to the mountain and they supposedly, where it says they perceived the God of Israel, right? What was this? Was this a physical manifestation of God, or was this a vision? I would argue it's a vision. Why? Because God explicitly says that Moses is unique because he experiences Temunat Hashem, which literally means the image of the Lord. Yet, in Numbers 12, Moses experiences Temunat Hashem, but Aaron and Miriam do not. All other prophets, God reveals himself in a vision or in a dream. But not with Moses. He experiences Temunat Hashem, which is why Aaron is included here with Nadav and Abihu, right? So they're not seeing the image of God, whatever that means. Only Moses would be able to understand. But they were rather seeing a vision. And it mentions the sapphire brick, right, in the appearance of the heavens for clarity. Well, if you look in Ezekiel, right, which is a similar passage where people, Christians will try and say, oh, look, he's seeing God. What explicitly says that he saw visions, right? I saw visions of God. This is Ezekiel chapter 1. What is a vision? It's not a literal physical manifestation of God. Rather, it is a vision. That's what it is. And I'm going to demonstrate this. Check this out. Here's what's really interesting about that. There was a sapphire stone in the likeness of a throne. The likeness of a throne, there was the appearance of a man above it. It's a vision, my friends. It's the same vision that was given to them in Parsha Mishpatim when Nadav and Abihu and the elders of Israel, quote unquote, perceived God. And once again, the word Temuna is nowhere to be found in this vision spoken of in Ezekiel chapter 1. Let me just double check on that. Let me find that word Temuna. And I'll do a little word search for it just to cover my bases. Taf Mem Nun. That should do it. So what I'm going to do is go to Ezekiel. Doesn't show up. Because it's not an image that Ezekiel was seeing. It's not an image that Moses, Aaron, Nadav, and Abihu and the 70 elders were seeing. Rather, according to Numbers 12, it was a vision, and only Moses experiences Temunat Hashem. For everyone else, we are forbidden to worship the image of the Lord, because if you go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, you're going to find the word Temuna all over the place, right? If you look here Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 15. There it is, right? Tamuna. It says, do not worship any form. You saw no image, just a voice. So that really solves the problem here. They are not seeing a physical human being. They are experiencing whatever they're experiencing here is a vision. So no necessity for us to assume that Jesus is God or that Jesus has anything to do with any of this. Jesus is not the angel of the Lord, and Jesus is not who is being seen in the vision described in Exodus 24, verses 9 through 11. So, I hope this video has been a blessing to you all. Shalom Aleichem.